Tools for writing, Tool 38. Tool 38 tells us that the first word of a subject-verb completer, or SVC, is sometimes a verbal, a VBL. When it is a verbal, it is either a continuing verbal, CVBL, for an action, or a pre-started verbal, PVBL, for a description. I prefer to substitute the word activity for action here. A continuing verbal is describing something that people do, such as swimming, right? We're talking about the sport called swimming, not that I'm swimming right now. But write this down and I'll show you some examples. Okay, here's a few sentences. The cup is cracked. Well, we know that the cup is the subject, right? And you may be tempted to say, oh, this is a be helper, and this is a cracked is something that you can do, so it's a pre-started verb, right? Well, this tool tells us that is just going to be our verb alone, and cracked, in this case, is a PVBL. Why? Because this word cracked describes the cup. Okay? It's not something that's being done to the cup in this sentence. Look at another one. The class is boring. Okay? The class is our subject. In this case, is our verb, and boring is a verbal. It's continuing CVBL, or continuing verbal. Why? Because boring is not something that the class is doing. It's describing what the class is. Okay? Those questions are confusing. Okay? Similarly, those questions is our subject. Oops. There's the S. Is our subject. Are is going to be a verb, and confusing is going to be the CVBL. Now, very slight changes to these sentences would change what these words are doing in the sentence. Okay? Look at the cup is cracked and compare it to the cup was cracked by Nina. Okay, now Nina is performing an action. She's cracking the cup, right? And that becomes, as we learned in the last chapter, what we call a passive verb, right? The cup is still the subject, but in this case, this is a be helper, and this is a pre-started verb, right? And by Nina tells us who performed that action, so that's our prepositional phrase. Okay, so do you see the difference between the cup is cracked, that just describes what the cup is, and the cup was cracked by Nina? That means someone is doing something to the cup, right? Similarly, we can make same kind of changes to this sentence. The class is boring. Well, you could also say the class is boring me. Now the class is doing something to me. It's making me bored, right? And in that case, it's not be and CBL, it's be helper is, and boring is the CV. So that's something that the class is doing, right? And it's boring what, or it's boring whom? It's boring me. So this becomes our subject-verb completer. Okay. Those questions are confusing. So the CVBL describes the questions, right? And in each of these cases, these CVBLs will also be the subject-verb completers in the sentence. Okay. The PVBL in this case will be the subject-verb completer, because when you ask the cup is what, the cup is cracked. So that completes the subject and verb. Write down these examples and then try a few of your own.